Hi, my name is Adam Taylor from DDI. I'm the head of client success for the U.S. operation, and today I'm excited to talk to you about leadership for today, tomorrow, and the future. For those of you who are not familiar with DDI, we've been in business since 1970, and we're in the business of building better leaders with you. Our goal is to have better leaders for a better future, and we do that in 4 categories. So we help our clients work on their strategy for leadership. How do you connect leadership back to the business? How do you drive selection decisions that remove bias and help you pick the individuals you need for that specific type of role? Then, of course, development across levels of leadership, helping people to hone their craft as a leader and to really step into that role in a different way that's very personal to them, as well as then succession management. How are you getting ahead of it? How are you finding ways to build the bench you need for not just your top executives, but also for the frontline leaders as well? And so I've been asking some folks lately, how do they feel about the future of leadership? And how do you feel about the future of leadership development? Or even, how do you feel about the future of organizational learning? And unfortunately, the response I get, the most optimistic response I've had recently is, I'm optimistically skeptical or hesitant, or optimistically positive, but I want to hold myself back. And I think that frames up where we are right now. We're at a confluence where, for the first time in our history in learning, we're not really want for content. We're not looking for some other way to explain something as far as a new concept. We're trying now at this point where we're combining technologies and information, and we're flooded by it. And so when I think about the future of leadership, I really think about this in this quote. So for those of you who don't know where this is Woodstock. And I would hazard a guess that those that were at Woodstock had no idea that it was going to be such a huge culture, perhaps counterculture, experience that would go down in history. And I think that's where we are today too with our learning and how we approach learning in organizations. Unfortunately, we're not doing very well. So 14 billion, and I'm quite convinced this is an underestimate, but $14 billion are being spent on leadership development. For the last 6 years, research shows we've been investing more in that space as well. And this is what we have to show for it. So as you can see, just 45% are rating the quality is going up. 60% of frontline leaders say they never receive any type of development at all. And then you can see this last piece here. We just don't have the bench. And that's becoming worse because we're sitting at an unemployment rate now at 4% or lower in some states. And so if you look at the specific candidate pools that you're going after, it's going to be very hard to find a replacement for those types of individuals. So with all that investment, why aren't we doing better? And really, at the end of it, it's about time. We all know that we're time crunched. We all know how hectic we are. We all know how much we have our kids in scheduled activities and run from one thing to another. And so the challenge that we have today is really focusing on time. But this is what we tend to do with the constraint of time. Organizations fall into these traps. And what I'd like you to do is think about these traps as I go through them and audit your own organization and your own approach a little bit as well. And so one would be relying on the old faithful. I don't have time, so I'm going to go to Adam. He knows how to do this. I'm going to slot him in. It's good. It's easy. It's fast. Problem is, what does that do for bias in your organization? How does that help you decrease some of the challenges you have with diversity and inclusion? The next one is, if you build it, they will come. So there's a big push to put everything online, get all the information out there, and it's all self-serve. But we know that because of time, people are not accessing that content the way that you might want them to change behavior. Next one is classic sink or swim. That's what I had to do. It's the bootstraps, right? So I'm going to promote you. Here's your great promotion, corner office. Now usually it's a cube. But go perform and see if you can do it. And organizations don't have time for that anymore. The one and done. So great event. Once a year, we take you off site. Maybe there's a great meal. Fantastic networking and engagement. But the one and done doesn't build the momentum for learning within your organization. This is the classic one that I hear all the time. Love everything you've said. What you've put together will help us move our organization forward. It will give leaders what they really need, but can you do it in 2 hours? Of course, obviously, the answer to that is no. And last one is tech, right? Tech's the answer to that. I'm waiting for the right technology to make it easier. And at the end of the day, leadership development is about a personal endeavor that you're picking as a craft to hone. And it's something that you do over time. So if you take one thing from this talk today, one thing and one thing alone, I really hope that it's this next piece, which is we need to get better at understanding what the experience is that the learner or the leader both wants and needs. So needs from where the business is going, where you're trying to take them, and also needs from where they are within the organization. And one way to start to audit your own development in your organizations is to start to think about these 5 categories. And so I'll talk through each one of these today. One is make time an advantage. It's a constraint, it's a known, it's not going to change. So how do you bring time in a way that allows you to adjust how you approach learning so you get the most out of it? The next one is it's all about me, right? So learners care about their experience. We're going through that now with our own customer experience that we have with various types of vendors outside of the workplace. Variety is the spice of learning. So bring in different modalities to try to drive things forward. And this is also a soapbox I'll get on, is do not leave development to chance. Far too often we do that. We're not purposeful about that, and we could drive much greater results. And the last one is where the future is going, is taking that learning that we give to leaders and to others in the organization and moving that closer to where they're actually performing, where they're actually doing the work. So they're learning while they're performing. And if you can do that, they're also learning while they're earning and providing ROI for the organization. So let's start with the first one, making time an advantage. What you can do is break down the minutes of a day. So we like to use 480. And simply put, there's about 480 minutes in a day that a leader has the opportunity to make an impact, to create their leadership brand in an organization, those small hallway conversations. Then when you think about what they have to do to try to change the business, they have about 480 days to make an impact as a leader to drive a business initiative. So it's about 1.5 to 2 years. And then finally, when you think about a career, you have about 480 months to start going after it and get yourself ready for that next leap, especially those big transition points, like going from operational to strategic. And we use this to then break it down into 3 categories to design learning within organizations. And so the first being the core is, what are the fundamentals? Go after it, hit it hard, hit it well, execute flawlessly. The next one is challenge, because you don't have time to not hit your quarterly results. And the last one then is career. So how are you getting people thinking about their career and where they want to go, at least quarterly, to get them set up? So when we start talking about it's all about me, we all want personalization in our leadership. And we did some research in our global leadership forecast recently. And as you can see at the very top here, we want things personalized. We have that in our daily life, in our consumer lives. And the challenge is right now, we're not finding a way to provide the feeling of personalization in a lot of leadership content or experiences. So one way to do that is to think about these 4 pillars. The first being, personalize it through some self-insight and some assessment that is truly about me, that helps me understand what I need to be looking for in the training. The next one then would be make it relevant to the business context. So your learning should change every year that you offer, because your strategies and the business context changes as well. The next one is emotional. Right? We are emotional creatures, so help people share stories, talk about their frustrations, get that interpersonal emotional connection going. And the last one, which I'm really excited about, is immerse. There's nothing like going through an experience to learn. And with it, this is where technology can actually help us. With AR and with VR, we can be thrust into that safe experience in a way that helps us still feel and react, but in a way that we can learn. The next fundamental is around spice, right? Variety, it's a spice of learning. And the way that we break this down is we put the learner in the middle, the leader in the middle, and we first wrap around and say, how are we engaging them through either assessments or self-insight or data to get them excited about why they should change? They have to decide that they want to learn to change as a leader. The next one then would be around how do you craft your learning experience? And really, how do you become a learning experience manager where you're able to cobble together various bits and bytes of information into an experience that is lasting and impactful? And you can do that through obviously classroom and virtual and micro. And then around that all is around how do you make it sticky? So how do you grow from that? And there's tools like VR, and there's tools like coaching, either internal or external. Ultimately, the managers have to be accountable as well. They have to know what people are going through, and they have to be the ones to help change the culture. And so if we break down each one of these with using insights to encourage, there's the self-insight tools, which I highly recommend you consider having into the individual learnings that you go through. It just helps people move into the topic that they're going through. It can be pretty simple and straightforward. There's the other side where you might go into a full behavioral assessment, where you get really deep analytics on someone's leadership capability across a number of competencies. And that's a lasting assessment they can use across years, perhaps, in their own development plan. On the learn side, what is the mix? What's the magic mix of different modalities that you're putting together to learn from? It's not going to be all web-based, and it's not going to be all face-to-face. It's not going to be all micro, and we know that. People still want to get together to talk and to learn from each other, and millennials do too. So how can you switch your face-to-face sessions so you're driving business and learning in a way that gets people engaged? So that's the learn side. And then with the grow, there's a few different areas that we're focusing on right now. One is, how do you get coaching in lower in the organization? It's not just for executives anymore. It doesn't need to be. That's not fair. It's not equitable. And frankly, if you get a coach in the right way at a lower level, you can help that person accelerate their learning so much faster than just conversations with their leader. The other one is virtual reality. So this is hot. We recently won an award for our diversity and inclusion virtual reality experience. And this is going to be something that's a game changer. Again, it allows you to put someone into that situation where they practice the skills in a safe environment that you just gave them in a very emotive way as well. And then the last one would be around what kind of foundation do you have as far as technology to allow people to go back in and grab content that's been curated for the type of learning that they're going through, so it can still be specific to your organization. And so this is a big area for me. I mentioned this already, is don't leave it to chance. And we went out and asked leaders to rank life's challenges. And you can see a number of them here. And that's the percentage of people that picked that category. The number one might be a little surprising, which is a role change. And sometimes we forget just how personal and how challenging it is to move levels in an organization. And what's really troubling to me personally is where leadership happens is at the front line. And so 19% of frontline leaders picked a role change as one of the hardest. And they're about half or more of your leadership population. They lead 80% of the folks in your organization, and they also account for about 70% of your engagement. So it's troubling, and also just it befuddles me, frankly, why these stats are here. So we have to do better. It can't take 4 years to get a frontline leader development after they've been in the role. Over half of leaders say they haven't had development until they get to the next role. And most of them are saying that they're really stressed. And we can change that. We have the technology and the tools to do that. It's just about doing it earlier. So it shouldn't be any surprise that when asked for leaders as far as how would you rate the quality of your leadership in your organization, only a third said that they were strong. So if we think about all the things that have changed and instead flip it to the things that haven't, at the end of the day, leaders aren't born, they're developed. Now, if you're born a certain way with a certain personality and a certain socioeconomic status, all those things, you likely have a different path to leadership. But even the best leaders need to be honing their craft daily to become the best leader that they can be. So let's keep in mind that it doesn't come naturally. Behaviors are learned over time. You can't sheep dip. You really have to stay on it. Learning isn't homogenous, so everyone's got a different style to learning, or they're in a different place or a different thing that they need to learn. And at the core of it, context changes for business, but leaders face similar challenges at every level. Frontline leaders have trouble with communication and coaching. Every single one of them is going to benefit from that kind of exposure. Going from operational to strategic, you're going to learn how to navigate the organization differently than you ever have before. Your political acumen, your influence savvy is key to that. So we know those things, so we shouldn't let go of the foundation. And you might think about, well, so how do we do foundation work flawlessly? And this would be an example where you can use the engage, learn, and grow categories. And you can think about, well, so what are some of the ways that we can drive some self-insight to engage them up front? What are just 2 or 3 things that we're going to do really well? And if we want to add a little more, maybe add a couple micro courses to that as well. And then how are we going to make it sticky through the grow? What are a couple of these areas that we're going to pop in and just do really well to make sure that the learning we give folks actually helps them change their behavior? And if people want to go deeper, well, there's the things on the right that you can curate. You can have access to different types of content or experiences in the same type of area to help people really take it to that next level. And there's reason to do this. So in our research, we have a global leadership forecast. It comes out every 2 years. We took a look at organizations' financial performance that are publicly traded. And those organizations that had a robust transition program of various levels of leadership were more than 2 times as likely to be in the top 20% of financial performance than other organizations. It just makes sense. So the training doesn't come after the promotion. The growth as a leader doesn't come after the promotion like it does right now. It shouldn't. We got to get that before they go through it so they can hit the ground running. And so the last one is really about the future. So it's, as I mentioned, it's narrowing that gap between when we're learning and when we're performing. And this is going to be a space for us to watch. So technologies like augmented reality is going to help us, right? We can put our phone in front of things and we can learn how to interact with things. Virtual reality is going to take us there as well. Coaching already does. So we can actually get into a coaching type of conversation that helps us bridge the gap of performing and learning at the same time, especially if we have a mentor, for instance. As we move forward with technologies, this is going to be an area that we need to look for to say, how do we further close the gap with learning and performing? And at the very end of the day, what we can do, I think, right now is get development to people sooner so that when they do perform, they can perform more effectively, and look at learning as an ongoing, continuous experience. Because if we do that, then you're constantly tapped into the learning and you're constantly reapplying back to the job. So with that, I'll leave you back with these 5 areas. And what I hope you do is go back to how your organization approaches leadership development and learning as an organization, and basically audit yourself on these things and identify one area that you could do better at and pick 3 things that you'll do differently for that one area. And then also identify one area that you're a rock star and identify one area that you can really focus in on to expand that strength. And with that, I hope you drive a more optimistic, maybe even more cautious if you need to, future focus on how you develop leaders in the future. Thank you.